Alright, so I've been meaning to do a video on this for quite some time, and unfortunately now it's going to kind of equivalent to nothing more than a lesson in Latin because it's basically a dead language, but there is still some value to it, and I think there's some cool things that you'll want to see. So we're going to be talking about DCS and running your HO trains on DCS. Not DCC, that is a separate standard. DCS is an MTH only standard. And in order to run one of these, you have to have a ProtoSound 3 engine. If your box is, if it's anything Steam, it'll run on ProtoSound because they've only ever made them that way. There's no DCC ready ones. If it's a diesel engine, just make sure that it has the logo for ProtoSound 3. If it's anything else like DCC ready, it will not run on DCS. Do not try this with any non-MTH engine that's DCC or straight DC. You will mess it up. Earlier models of MTH used to come with a little dip switch in the tender sometimes that had a switch for DCS or DCC. What we're going to be running today with our Allegheny, this one there's no switches on the tender. It'll just run just fine just on DCS. So we're going to be taking a first look here at the DCS Commander, which is kind of a scaled down DCS system that was aimed for the HO market. And there is some unique features about it. And with DCS, you can do more with your MTH steam locomotives than what you can on DCC. There's some features there that you just can't access the same way. So we'll take a look at some of that. And just taking a look at this here, so this, uniquely you can power one of these with actually AC or DC. What they used to sell with it was a Z1000 brick, which this is actually from an old O-scale conventional system called a Z750 that was sold in the late 90s. This will run it. A Z1000 brick will run it. It's an AC power source, but it will convert it. If you have another HO source, you can just simply wire it up here. Like if you have a NCE 5 amp power supply or something like that, you can just wire it up right here. And then of course you have your track output. This input here was only used for software updates, which I did believe I do have this updated to the most recent firmware. There really hasn't been any firmware for it since 2011. And I just used a serial to USB adapter for that. So I did completely disconnect my ESU system. So we have just the straight power wire here, which is hooked into a distribution block underneath the layout. I removed all of my locomotives off here completely because I want to make sure I don't have any of my DCC locomotives on track when I run this. So we're going to hook this up here, plug in our power supply, and get this going. So I've gone ahead and wired it up and plugged it in here, and then immediately upon plugging it in, the unit itself will power up. That's one thing that I don't necessarily like about this. I wish that it had a separate power on button that you could just leave it hooked up and plugged in and shut it on and off. But in order to completely turn this off, you want to unplug it. But you'll notice here when it first starts up, it's actually in DC conventional mode. So this would actually run a standard traditional powered DC locomotive. And we'll go ahead and use our scroll wheel here to up the voltage. And I would think as soon as I get up to around 6 or 7, I may notice my Christmas trees power up here. Yeah, there we go. And you see we got power. So we're on straight conventional mode right now. So this scroll wheel doesn't allow you to do fast scrolling. You gotta go very, very slow, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. From everything that was in the original MTH press releases regarding this, its conventional mode for DC is supposed to produce some very, very clean power. I don't really believe that I have any DC examples of a locomotive laying around that I might be able to try to test with it. Doesn't appear I really have anything at the moment. If I did, I would show you. But I would like to use this also for testing for when I'm doing some repairs on just straight DC locomotives. Like some of these here for the local train shop. I think that'd be handy to have that. I have some older ones out there, but I'd prefer to use this. So we're going to be running DCS. So in order to do that, just hit the DCS mode here. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, we're powered up here. And probably one thing that I should do is disconnect these because these are DCC. Alright, so we got our locomotive on track here, and track power's on, but the engine is not started. So a couple things on here you can do to start it. You can either just flip up the throttle, that'll turn it on, very similar to like what a Broadway does on DCC, or it actually has a startup button. This would be the same as hitting F3 on DCC, but everything is labeled here, so you don't really have to remember functions. And it does take a long press here to get turn on. There we go. So it's fired up. Some of the other controls on here, you'll have your headlight, your mute switch, and smoke unit here. You'll hear that kick on there. I don't think I have any in there right now, so I'm going to go ahead and shut that off. Plus, it's really loud.
Drop off for Outlaws next stop.
And there's passenger freight announcements on here. One really nice feature is that you can just turn the volume up and down right here. You know, that's something I really wish DCC had. I mean, otherwise you have to program a separate CV to do that up and down. And of course you have on here, same as F1, got your whistle. Now one thing you can do on here that's unique to this is you can actually quill. And how you quill is you hit A1. Pretty neat. Then of course you have your direction here, which is marked by the little arrow up there. Now the other really cool thing here is that everything is in scale miles an hour. So as I move this one click, that engine's going to be doing 1 scale mile an hour. And we'll go ahead and test that. Oh. As you can see here, the slow speed is very good. Right on the nose. And just the same on here, if I move this up, I'll be doing 7 or 8 scale miles an hour. I love being able to just turn that down whenever I want to. Very smooth. We'll back it up here. So some other functions on here. Cut your coupler slack on there, which I don't think that actually makes a sound effect. Oh yeah, there we go. So you have to start going for that to make a sound. So another little nifty feature on here, if we'll go forward here for a second. Actually, we're backing up. You can hit this labor button, and it will actually, as you hold it, it intensifies the chuffs. And the moment I let off, back to normal. You can also do the same thing for, let me slow down here. Change back to forward. So if I hit drift here, you'll just hear the side rods. It's basically coasting. And the moment I let off, back to normal. You can also give it a little boost of throttle with this boost button here. So if I'm going uphill and I need a little more juice, just hit it. And again, when I let off of it, it goes back to normal. Or if I want to slow down for a corner, I can just hit this brake button right here. And then we can get going again as soon as I let off of it. So some really neat features that are built in there. I mean, that's stuff that you can't really do on DCC, at least not without really programming a lot of functions in there. And I don't think they work as well as these. This is just very easy to use. And we're rolling here at 35 mile an hour scale speed. And we'll see how close it is. My bet's it's probably going to be right on. Pretty close. And some of the other buttons on here, there's a MOM button, which is momentum. So as soon as you hit that, it builds that in there for you. And one of the other cool features on here is this all button. So the fact that all MTH engines run the exact same speed at a given throttle setting makes it, everything out of the box that's MTH is already speed matched. You can run any MTH engine ever produced with any other MTH engine, and there's no need to speed match because they're all going to run the exact same scale speed. So it makes it really easy if you're going to throw, you know, maybe a double or triple header steam on here, or you want to throw on a diesel backup, or maybe you want to simulate like you're towing this engine to the museum. Really all you have to do, if they're on the same track, is just hit the all button and you just use your scroll wheel. They're pretty much already consisted. There's really no other functions or other things that you need to set. Now, this system, it says, is limited to remembering 10 engines. However, I don't really think that there's anything specific in here that you need to program as far as an engine. There's really, for most of this stuff, I mean, there's really not any programming that you really have to do. Everything is pretty much controllable through here. You don't really need to worry about what address the locomotive is. That's not really a thing on DCS. You don't need to worry about volume settings or any of that because you can do it right here. Turn stuff on and off. Everything is labeled, and it's the same across every single engine. So I know what most of you are thinking, and that's, you know, I already have a DCC system and I can run my MTH trains on that as well as everything else that I already have. While that may be true, One of the things that I find difficult is that being that I have so many different engines and there's so many of them that have different things programmed onto different functions, and MTH is a perfect example of that because the way that they have their DCC functions is completely different than most locomotives, like the startup being on F3 and other things kind of being out of place. It's really nice to plug in a system like this that you can just have everything out in front of you. You don't have to worry about how it was programmed or how it wasn't programmed. You can put any train on the track and just run it. And to be honest, I find that this is probably easier to use and more enjoyable to just get a locomotive up and going. Plus, the other thing is, too, it's not always about you. You may have other people in your family who don't understand DCC or have any idea what that is or any of these other acronyms. This is something that's simple and easy to use for anyone. I can think of, my parents, for example. They'll put out a train under the tree every year at Christmas, and they just want it to run. And they're used to just having a power pack that just has an up and down and forward and reverse, and that was about it. This is something easy that you can just get out and run a train, or for kids, that may not understand all the intricacies of DCC, and you just want them to have fun and enjoy it. This is a really great thing. So to some degree, it kind of does break my heart that it's just something that isn't going to be utilized anymore. Because MTH, selling all of their HO tooling to Scale Trains has already announced that they are not going to use DCS at all. They're going to put ESU in their engines, which, there's a lot of merit to that. But, there is a spot in my heart that kind of wishes that MTH was still around and still doing Protosound 3 engines, because now that I have something like this, they're actually a lot more enjoyable to run, and they're kind of meant to be run on this system rather than DCC. I mean, they'll do everything that you can do on that, but it's just easier on this system. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at So I was just going to end the video with what we've shown so far, but I did find something that is extremely useful, maybe even the most beneficial part of this system, and that is that this has a pass-through mode. So what it allows you to do is on the back of it here, we'll take a look at the hookups. So for your input to power this unit, you have two options. You can plug in the Z750 brick or the Z1000, which is an AC power supply, so we'll take those. Or you can plug in a DC power supply or even a variable voltage DC power supply. So what you can do is from the output of your DCC system, right here, this is my main bus wire, you can plug that into the input, and it will actually power up the unit. And you can actually choose to have this in a pass-through mode, so it basically sits in line with your power going to the track, but it doesn't actually do anything. It still allows the DCC signal to come through. But you can also hit a button and switch to conventional power, so you can just run straight DC or straight DC. And then you also have a mode in which you can enable the DCS. Now, when you enable the DCS, you do need to make sure that any DCC locomotive is off the track, because I found actually what happens is they start to go in reverse, kind of at like a little slow speed. I'm not really sure what causes it, but it doesn't really seem to hurt anything. But you definitely want to take those off there, because you can't just have a random locomotive running in reverse. That could cause some adverse things to happen. So I'm going to integrate this into my layout, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Your results may vary depending on how you have your layout hooked up. But what it's going to mainly give me the capability of doing is I'm going to designate this third track right here. This is going to be my DCS track. So the other three tracks are going to be running just DCC, but on this track, it's going to allow me to run DC, for testing out locomotives or doing fixes or old repairs on just old stuff. It's also going to allow me to run DCS for MTH stuff. And then I have that pass-through mode that I can run DCC on. So I got 3 different modes I'm going to run on this track. I don't want that capability on all the tracks, just because I may be in a situation where maybe I want to have an MTH engine on this track and several other brands running at the same time. But I do want to have at least one dedicated track that I can use for testing, especially the straight DC stuff. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that, and we're going to take a little trip under the layout here. Alright, so we're underneath it here, and what you will see here, this is my main DCC line coming off my ESU control system. And, ouch, ow, ow, ow. Hip just hit my head. Anyways, this comes up here to these terminal distribution blocks. So basically I have one side for, one rail and one side for the other rail. And then from that, I have 4 tracks, and each of them have their feeder wires drop down to here. So basically each one is kind of teed into this here. So it basically splits out the power between the 4 lines. So what I'm going to do is for track number 3, which would be one of these 2, I'm going to take this wire, and I'm going to need to get some more terminal distribution blocks here. So what we'll do is we'll branch off probably a line from here and a line from here into that to feed it. And then we're going to run that back. But I got to get the distribution blocks here first. This is what we do in Pennsylvania when we're bored. We go to Home Depot. So just found some terminal blocks, the last 2 they had. And this should be everything that we need to integrate DCS into the layout. Alright, so we got some light on the subject now. So this is our main DCC junction point here, and I'm immediately noticing some things that I want to take care of. Initially when I did this, I used this, blocking my light here, very thin wire, and I actually see that one of these is not even hooked up there. That's kind of dangerous. But what I found that I have better results with is this thicker, this is 16 gauge speaker wire actually. I actually had some signal problems with this thinner stuff, whatever gauge this is. I think it was like doorbell wire or something. It's pretty awful. But I redid a lot of these sections with the thicker wire. So we're going to clean up that a little bit, put in some new jumpers, make sure that everything is connected securely. We'll take a look at that. Alright, so we finished up our modifications here. And kind of just to explain the flow. So we have our main DCC line, which comes in on this wire here. And then it gets split out to each of the 3 tracks. And then off of this area, then I have this junction here, which goes up. So it's feeding DCC power up to the MTH input. So it's getting its power off of this wire. And then its output, which is this wire right here, is getting fed into this junction and then into the track 3 wire leads, which is my 28 radius loop. So I could have just soldered the wires here instead of using a terminal block, but I want to be able to disconnect this easily if I need to. So that's kind of the path here. So we'll go back up top side. Alright, so in summary, power goes out from the DCC system here into those terminal blocks, then comes up here and feeds the DCS commander, as well as this track, and this track. And then out from the DCS commander is this line here, which feeds track number 3 here, which is going to be our DCS, DCC, and DC power. DCS, well, all 3. So when I hit the power here, should power up and say pass. So it automatically powers up in pass-through mode, which means it's in DCC mode right now. So I will show the 3 modes here in a second. I'm going to test out, since I changed a bunch of wiring here, I'm going to do some testing on all 4 of these. Make sure they run DCC just fine, and we'll come back. Alright, so I've done all my testing, and it seems like everything is working here, and did a little bit of track cleaning too, because it's probably been 6 months or more since I did that. Didn't clean the outside too here, but I will get to that later. So we're going to demo the 3 modes. So we're just powered up here. We're in pass, which means I'm in DCC mode. So we're going to go ahead and take our throttle here, and what we have on track is the MTH Allegheny. So this engine is actually capable of running in all 3 modes, so it's really the perfect engine to test. We're going to go ahead and throttle up. We are in DCC mode. As you can see, works just fine. So then we're going to go straight DC, which on here would be conventional. And you heard the engine just shut off there. So we'll go ahead and give it some power. I think it takes about 5 volts before it starts to power up. Unfortunately, you do have to scroll slowly. So we got lights on our cars. No engine sound just yet. Oh, there we go. So we're running on straight DC mode. We'll see how much it takes before it gets going. And you can, of course, still control direction. Even on straight DC. Alright, and our lights went out there. We're scrolling back to 0. Alright, and then the last mode is, of course, the DCS. Alright, so let's wrap it up. So, in closing, I love this thing. I really, really do. I've had it for years, and I've never really bothered to test with it or really dive into anything about it. Kind of regret that. You know, I probably would have used this a lot more over the years had I known that it could do everything that it can do. And it's not without limitation. One of the things that it's kind of a pain with this is it's very difficult to switch between multiple locomotives running at the same time. Not as easy as something like my ecosystem here, where you can just have multiple throttles going even at the same time and really control multiple locomotives at the same time. It's a little bit cumbersome with this setup, and also you can't run a wireless remote with it. Does not have capability of working with the MTH wireless remote, unfortunately. It does have that RS-32 serial port on the back, And I am going to try if I can get a hold of the MTH Wi-Fi DCS add-on to see if it does work with this, to see if I can run app capability. I don't think it's supported, but I can't really find any documentation saying one way or the other. I would lean towards no, but, might be a surprise. And if and when that happens, I'll let you know. So, these are not completely unavailable out there. I mean, they do occasionally pop up on eBay. That's how I got mine a number of years ago. Didn't come with a box or anything or an instruction manual. The manual is online, so I just went ahead and printed it out. So I have that. And those files will be out there for years to come, so won't be too much trouble finding support for it. MTH, of course, is not making these anymore. It's definitely not something that got passed on to scale trains or even to Atlas. Atlas did take over some of the MTH O scale tooling, and they're actually going to be using Protosound 3 in their models going forward. Unfortunately, that DCS technology is not something that Scale Trains is going to use, so really none of this will be useful in any way, shape, or form with the new Scale Train stuff, unless you're running straight, DC or DCC, which you wouldn't really have a use for this if you're running those modes. Cost-wise, I think you could probably find these anywhere from about 80 and up. I probably wouldn't want to pay much more than 120 or 30 for one of these. And you may not want to make that investment unless you're somebody that has, more than one MTH locomotive. I've actually only got, I think, 4 engines that run Protosound 3 right now. I actually used to have a lot more. I've since sold off some of them, but this is definitely going to make me want to pick up some older MTH models, and I think there'll be a lot more of those out here in the years to come, especially as Scale Trains goes through and does a lot of that stuff in the old catalog under the Scale Trains name. A lot of people are going to want those versions rather than the MTH models, so I think this does have some long-term usage for me. Plus, it also finally gives me the ability to test DC engines that I'm fixing without having to create a separate loop of track and hook up alligator clips and just going through that hassle. So that's a bit about it for this one, and hope you enjoyed it. A little bit of a view into something you probably didn't know that well, and I certainly learned a lot through the course of this video. So a lot more coming up, and just working on cleaning up things here around the layout. Put away the UP Heritage engine. Still a lot of clutter here. I'm working through it. But so long, folks.